Welcome to the Love Lab Podcast, a safe and fun place to get real and learn about sex. Whether you're a man or woman, single or couple, this is the show for you. I am your host, Kevin Anthony, and I am here to guide you to go from good to amazing in the bedroom and your relationships. All right, welcome back to the Love Lab Podcast. This is episode 323, and it is titled Remembering Céline Remy and Her Favorite Teaching Topics. So, today's episode is episode 323, as I just said. The very last episode that Céline and I ever did together was 223. So this marks the 100th episode of the Love Lab podcast that I have done by myself and without my co-creator and co-host Céline Remy. And if you knew Céline at all, you would know that she loved to commemorate things. She loved to take things that, happened in life and celebrate them regularly. Now, people do that in life, but they only usually do it for major milestones. The birth of a child or, a marriage, maybe a death, something like that. But Céline liked to do it for all kinds of things. We turned the date of our first date into a commemorative day that we would remember every year. Like, this is the day that we went on our very first date together. So she loved to do that, and it kind of thought to me when I realized what number show this was coming up. And it also corresponds with the anniversary of her passing. It just seemed really appropriate to me to do an episode commemorating, remembering her, and going over some of her favorite things that she loved to teach clients. So that's what I'm going to do in this episode. I'm using the 100th episode on my own as a way to remember the amazing woman that she was, share a little bit of her story, our story, and also I want to dive a little bit into some of her things, the things that she absolutely loved teaching people. So I have some teaching points for men, things that she really liked working with men on, and some teaching points for women, some things she really liked working with women on. So that is what I'm going to do in this episode. I realized I did an episode right after she passed, and it was very short. It was very emotional. It was very difficult for me to do, but I felt a need to explain to the audience why Céline Remy was no longer here with me. After 223 episodes of us together, I felt you all needed to know why she wasn't here. But, that happened just, I don't know. Maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe a month. I don't even remember at this point, honestly, after she passed. And, if you've ever lost a partner like that, there's a term I had never heard of before that I have since, of course, heard of and can attest from my own personal experience is real. And that's something called widow brain, where your brain really isn't functioning properly. And so trying to remember exact dates and exactly, what happened and when it happened and all that from back then is actually a little challenging because, you're experiencing a traumatic event filled with a lot of grief and your brain just isn't working the way that it should. So I don't remember exactly when I put that video out, and I don't even remember what I really said in it, to be honest. I have never gone back and listened to it again. And I don't know that I ever will. However, I didn't really talk a lot about her or her story, or really do a proper sort of commemoration to her back then, because I just wasn't capable of doing it. So that's what I'm going to do today. Before we do that, though, a short word from my sponsor, something that she and I created together, which we'll talk about during this show. Power and Mastery 3.0. Power and Mastery 3.0 is the latest version of the popular men's sexual mastery course. If you are struggling with erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, or simply want to increase your skills in the bedroom, then Power and Mastery is for you. Join the exclusive club of men who have taken their sexual performance into their own hands and become sexual masters. Mastering your sexuality is a key component to becoming the man she has always dreamt of and craves. Don't leave your sexual performance up to chance or the throw of the dice. Become a sexual master today by going to powerandmastery.com and joining the exclusive club of men who have taken their destiny into their own hands. That is powerandmastery.com. We'll talk more about power and mastery and where that came from and how that evolved over the time. But first, let's get into a little bit of Celine's story. Now, this has been published on our website for a long time, so I'm not saying anything here that hasn't already been made publicly available, but I realize a lot of people don't really go and read, those particular pages on the website. So a lot of you don't really know Celine's story and how she ended up doing this work. I'm obviously not going to go into all the details, just a brief overview, but it gives you an idea of who she was and what made her want to do the work that she was doing. So when she was very young, her mother actually had a cancer battle herself. And was successful in healing from that cancer journey. And after that was over, her mother wanted to experience something that made her feel alive again. And so she enrolled, along with Céline, into a women's-only Taoist workshop that taught them how to use sexual energy to empower themselves. And, that... as she tells it on the website, obviously you got to be sort of succinct and you can't ramble and go on. Like, that's kind of how she tells it in the website. In fact, I copied that line straight from what she wrote on the website. But if you were to hear her tell it in real life, as I had many times, that experience was so profound for her that she instantly knew at that moment that she wanted to work helping people with their sexuality. So much so that by the end of the course, she was asking the instructor, where did you learn this? And where can I learn it? And what can I do? And all that kind of stuff. So, the experience, as she says here, the shared healing experience fueled her desire to study Eastern holistic practices and sexuality. So that was really the thing that inspired her. That's what really started her journey. And I think she was maybe, I want to say 16 at the time that happened. So very, very young. And she was fortunate enough that she had experienced, some good teachings around sexuality at a very young age. It took most of us significantly longer to be able to find that kind of information and really change our lives. So as a result of that, she ended up traveling to Thailand, where she studied ancient Taoist techniques with Master Mantak Chia. If you've ever, dove into the world of Taoist sexual teachings, whether you actually went to Thailand to study at his center, or if you read one of the many popular books that he has written. Mantak Chia is, one of the biggest names. You might even call him sort of a living legend in the Taoist sexual practices world. And she had an opportunity to live there and study directly with him for a little while. After that, she ended up living in India for several months, where she studied Tantra, yoga, meditation, Ayurveda. And as she would tell the story, that's where she really learned the importance of balancing mind, body, and spirit. So I think this is one of the things that made her unique in the way that she would teach this material because, I think it's changing a little bit now, but early on, a lot of the people who were teaching, Tantra practices or Taoist sexual practices were really only focusing on the sex part of it. And, she really brought in the balancing of the body, mind, and spirit, of which sex was only one part. And if you really truly want to master something, or if you really truly want to become a sexual master, then you have to include all of those things: body, mind, and spirit. So I think that was one of the things that really made her unique in the way that she approached teaching people about sexuality. So as she also says in her story, she used her own life as a laboratory. She explored open relationships, multiple sex partners. She had long-term relationships with major age differences. And all of those experiences showed her the importance of putting love above everything else. Well, I knew I wouldn't get through this without getting at least somewhat emotional. So putting love above everything else and also making relationships a priority. And that is something that her and I really shared, the idea of making relationships a priority. And it's still something that I teach to this day with everybody that I coach, especially in today's modern world. And it just keeps getting worse as far as our priorities that overtake the relationship, our jobs, raising our families, just trying to keep up on the crazy stuff that's going on in this world and trying to be prepared for it. Like, all of that stuff can really take over your time and your energy and prevent you from focusing on your relationship, which honestly I think is one of the most important things that you will ever have in this life. So yeah, that was something that we really shared, and that is a lot of what fueled our passion to help people with relationships. All right, and then lastly, in 2012, after all of the years she spent studying and traveling and learning, that is when she founded her holistic practice. And so that's when she officially started helping teach other people this information, this body of work that she had spent so much time studying. We're going to jump forward a few years now, and we're going to talk about when we got together and how that impacted her work and then eventually our work together. So we got together in 2016. We both already had our own coaching practices. So as I said, hers was going in 2012. So she already had 4 years of working with clients on a regular basis, and she worked with a lot of clients during those first 4 years. It took her a while to really figure out her own unique style of how she wanted to offer her work, and so she tried a lot of different ways of presenting the work in the world. Some of it was like super low cost. Like, originally she was not charging a lot of money, and so that opened up the door for just a lot of people to access her work. Ultimately, it wasn't sustainable for her. She was starting to kind of burn out. Like, you can only see so many clients in a day. So things had to shift, but that allowed her to gain a lot of experience really quickly. So by the time we got together in 2016, she already had a very thriving and flourishing practice, and she was really putting a lot of energy into it. In fact, a funny story, which we've told on the show before, is at one point she was interested in dating me, but due to my previous relationship, that wasn't a possibility yet. And so when that shifted for me and I was open again, I had reached out to her and said, "Hey, are you still open to going on a date?" To which she replied, and we used to joke about this all the time, "Sorry, I'm too busy. I'm putting all of my energy into my business right now." Yeah, that's right. She turned down the first date with me and gave me the reason that she was too busy working on her business. And she actually was. She was working very hard on establishing the business end of it. like so many of us, we get into this work because we love the work itself, but it doesn't necessarily mean we've mastered what it takes to run a business and to make it profitable. And if it's not profitable, it's not sustainable, which is something that sometimes people will, kind of give you a hard time about in this industry, about, how much money you charge, or, how you structure things. And, you just have to realize, like, if you can't make a living, if you can't pay your bills, if you can't live reasonably comfortable, and by reasonably comfortable, I mean you have just at least what you need to survive. If you can't do that with the work that you're doing, then that's just not sustainable work. And this idea that you have to martyr yourself and live like a pauper and struggle and all of that just so that you can deliver your work to the world just isn't true. So that's a little bit of an aside. But all of that to say that she was working really hard on her business. And eventually, though, she came around in a rather short amount of time after that and said, you know what, I can make time for that date. And we did. So we got together in 2016. We both had our own practices going. And in the beginning, we kept them separate. I was doing coaching work prior to being with Céline also. I was doing a little bit different type of coaching work. While there was work around sexuality, I actually started doing more, I guess what you would kind of call, I don't know, I don't like to use the term life coaching, but it was like relationship and life coaching. So I was working with couples primarily, trying to help them have better relationships. In those early days, a lot of what I was doing was like, a couple was on the verge of breaking up or divorce, and I would try to help them figure out whether or not they wanted to stay together, whether or not they should stay together, and if not, how to transition out consciously, as we say. The term these days is conscious uncoupling. So I was doing a lot of that kind of work early on, but I kept getting called to do more work around sexuality. What do I mean by that? People kept asking me. They literally kept asking me, like, that's what they wanted. And so I started going a little bit in that direction as well. So all of that was there when we got together, but we did keep what we were doing separate in the beginning because it wasn't quite the same what both of us were doing. And we didn't want to do anything in the beginning that would jeopardize our relationship. And, when you're early on and you're getting to know somebody, like, you don't really know how that's going to go. Like, a lot of couples can't work together. If they work together, they'd drive themselves insane and they'd end up breaking up or divorced or whatever. So we played it kind of safe in the beginning there. The first thing that we really started to do together was power and mastery. So you heard a commercial for that in the beginning of this episode. And Céline had created the version 1 of Power and Mastery. And it was 1 course, not 3 like it is today currently. And it was great. It had the foundation, but she knew that she needed to redo it. She knew that there was a lot more information that she wanted to put into it. And she also knew that she wanted a man's perspective, because Power and Mastery is a men's sexual mastery course. And, yes, she's a woman, so that doesn't mean that she can't teach men's sexuality, just like it doesn't mean a man can't teach women's sexuality. But she really wanted that man's perspective in there. Like, she wanted somebody that understood what she was teaching already, and that could articulate things from the man's point of view that, she couldn't really do because she was a woman. And so she really actually wanted me to do the next version of Power and Mastery with her. And at that time, I was not in the spotlight or in front of the camera or making videos or doing anything like that. So, I was like, okay, this is all right. I mean, I was in from the beginning. I like anything that she wanted to do. I was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. But it was definitely, it was a little bit of a stretch for me. And, a lot of those early videos are still in the course because the information is great and it's still very valid. But if you watch me in some of those videos, you can see the difference. You can see I'm not as maybe confident or maybe not quite as well spoken then as I am now. But the information is there, and that's why I haven't changed a lot of those early videos, because the information is still great. What we put together in those early days when we were working together, I swear it was inspired by spirit, whatever you want to call that spirit. But I swear we channeled a lot of that information, because I think it even went above and beyond where we were personally at that time somehow. I don't even know how. And we put that together, and it was a lot of work. We worked on it for a long time together. We recreated everything from scratch, and we broke it up into 3 courses, and it added so much more information than was in the original one. It really was a labor of love. It's been very successful since, but in the beginning, it's hard to get a new program off the ground, especially when you don't have a lot of visibility out there yet, and you're sort of building your reputation, and you don't really know anything about marketing. So that was the first big project that we really worked together on from the beginning. And at the same time we were working on that, I got really into helping her with the back end of her business. So I was spending a lot of time, our website was originally, CelineRemy.com. It's now KevinandCeline.com. And it's soon going to be transitioning over to just KevinAnthonyCoaching.com. That's a whole other thing that's going to be happening in the coming new year. But at the time, it was just CelineRemy.com. And, we were really making her the public face of the work that we were doing together, because she was a bit more established out there already. But I was doing a lot of the work behind the scenes. And so not just like, helping her with the website and all that kind of stuff, but by behind the scenes, I mean, she would have a strategy call with a new client, and, she would, come back after that strategy call and say, okay, so I had this call with this client. Here's what's going on for him. What do you think would be, the best way to approach this particular client? Or even clients that she was working with, like, oh, came up in the session. Like, as a man, what do you think about that? And we would talk about it. And that's not to say that everything that Celine did or put out there or, was working with clients on was a collaboration. She was brilliant on her own. She had a wealth of knowledge, and I even learned a lot of things from her, just like she learned things from me. But there was a fair amount of that back and forth about talking about, the clients and the work and all of that, and strategizing together. And we used to talk about this a lot on our morning walk. So every morning we would get up first thing and go for a walk in the neighborhood, and we would talk about a lot of this stuff. And that led me one day to sort of have an inspiration. And I said, man, these conversations that we're having could be really valuable for other people to hear. And I said, we should do a podcast. To which she kind of laughed, and she was like, well, you're right. These conversations are really valuable, and I believe that they could help people. She's like, but I don't have the bandwidth to start another project and do a podcast. And I was like, yeah, but it wouldn't really be any different than what we're doing now. We'll just record it, And she was like, she's like, I like the idea. I'm just not ready for it yet. But that was the original inspiration for this show. And, here I am 323 episodes later and 6 years later. So that was kind of the idea for the podcast. And it took almost a year. That was about 2017-ish, I think, when we had that conversation. It took almost a year, roughly, give or take, before she said, okay, you know what? we've got enough of the foundation built for this business. Things are humming along nicely. We like the direction they're going in. She's like, now we can spend time on a new project. And so the Love Lab podcast was born. That was also, the title for this was also an inspiration, where, we used to say all the time that our bedroom was our lab, because we would make love, we would have these amazing experiences, and then afterwards we would talk about it, and she would ask me questions like, how did you do that? That thing that you just did, like, how did you do that? Because I need to be able to figure out how to teach men how to do what you just did. And so, we would sit there and we would kind of reverse engineer the experiences we were having and how we got to where we got to. And so, we came up with the title, The Love Lab. I guess we could have called it the Sex Lab, but that would have made marketing even more difficult than it already is. That's where the inspiration for the title of this podcast came from. And I remember the moment very clearly when we were laying there in bed after making love, and I said, let's call it the Love Lab. And that was it. So that's so it was 2018 when we started creating this podcast, and we launched our first episodes, and here we are at 323. Also, around that same time that we were launching this is when we also started coaching clients together, and that's when we really started merging our separate practices into one practice. And that felt really good. I think in the beginning we felt a little overwhelmed with how to make that happen. But by then we had been doing so much work together that we felt like it not only was it okay to do, but it was what we needed to do in that moment. And so we continued doing podcast episodes and coaching together as well as separately, and working on all the back end stuff together. And we were quite the team. It really was an amazing opportunity to work so closely for so long with somebody that I cared so deeply about. And to be able to share this work with the world, it truly was a blessing. So we continued that right up until, we recorded our last podcast, like episode 223. Again, I don't remember exactly, but it was probably a week or two prior to her passing. And it was interesting because, she was suffering from a pretty challenging health issue that, while we managed very well for about a year and a half, without really anybody noticing, in the last few months, things started to change rather significantly. And you can see that. You can see that in how she looks, physically, in those, later episodes. Like, it's obvious she wasn't the same bright, glowing, vivacious, full of energy, smiley, giggly person that she was before. And, I absolutely gave her the choice, whether or not she wanted to continue doing these. And she wanted to. She was coaching clients right up until the very end because she loved the work that she did. Like I said, doing podcasts until a week or two before. Her last coaching client was a female client who it was like right up until the end. So she loved what she did. She loved sharing this work with people, and she was committed to doing it as long as she physically could. So, that's kind of a brief. I know brief, it's half the show, 30 minutes brief, but that's kind of a brief telling of the story of, how Céline started teaching, how she started learning the information, how that then got her into teaching it, how we came together, how we started to merge our work together, and how we really became, a really powerful team in the space of coaching sex, love, and relationships. And yeah, we planned on doing it for the rest of our lives, obviously. There was another plan out there for us other than that, but I really felt passionately that even when she passed, the best way that I could keep her work alive and her memory alive was to continue it. People were like, well, are you going to take her videos down, or you're going to take the shows down that you did together? Are you going to change the whole website and all of that? And I was like, no, absolutely not. I felt the best way to, it's like keep it alive, but also, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I don't know. I'm drawing a blank on the word right now, but I felt it would do a disservice to the world, really, to take down her life's work. And so it will always be there. It will always continue to help people. The knowledge, the information is rock solid. There are things that have existed throughout all of human existence, and they're not going to change. And the fact that I still get messages, comments and things on videos and podcasts that Céline did, where people are still grateful for learning from her. It's amazing. It's amazing. So that will not change at all. However, and I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. I don't think I did. But when you listen to this, I'm recording it early, as all my shows are recorded a little early. When you listen to this, it will be just after the 2-year anniversary of her passing. And I was really dedicated for the last 2 years to keeping her front and center in everything that we created, because she was just such a huge part of everything that we built together. It didn't feel right, didn't seem right to just suddenly rebrand everything and have it, it's all just me now, I really needed to have a period of time to slowly transition out of the two of us and into, just me. So, what you will be seeing coming up in 2025 is I will be rebranding to Kevin Anthony Coaching. You may have seen a few little hints at that throughout my ecosystem already, as I'm starting to gradually move in that direction. But just know that the content that Céline put out there will always be there. The blog posts that she's written, the videos that she's done, the podcasts that she's done, like the handouts that we've created, the online, like so much of that we did together. None of that is going to change or go away. It's really just the branding, and the reason is at this point, having it branded as both of us is actually starting to cause more confusion for people that are new to my ecosystem, because people are still asking for Céline, and they're still wanting Céline to come on their shows and things like that, because we are still branded Kevin and Céline. It's still our photos on everything, our names on everything. And so, I have to keep explaining why that's not possible anymore. And of course, all the new YouTube videos and all the new podcasts. So, if you're looking at, the last 2 years of content that have been put out there, it's obviously all my content, because she's not here to create content with me. So because of that, I will be doing that in the coming year. So you'll start to see that happening. But just to know that in the years that we spent together, both as a couple, as husband and wife, and as, co-creators of this business, what I have learned from her and what we have created together is so much a part of who I am and what I teach now, that although it might be me, Kevin Anthony Coaching, you can't separate out the influence that she has had, and that I still continue to teach so much of what she taught when she was alive. And that is going to take me to the second half of this show, which is I want to cover some of her favorite things that she liked to teach people. We're going to cover some of her favorite topics, and I'm not just going to talk and say, oh, she liked to talk about this and this and this and this. I'm going to give you the topic and then give you a few teaching points with that topic. I have it broken up between Celine's favorite topics to teach men and her favorite topics to teach women. So it's not just a tell a story time in this episode, because I always like to provide value in every episode that I do. So we're going to get a little bit of teaching value on the second half of this show as well. But before we do that, a brief word from my second sponsor, which of course is me. Are you a couple? Are your relationship and sex life where you want them to be? Are there changes you would like to make but just don't know how? Maybe you think there is nothing that can be done. If you are not 100% happy with where your relationship or sex life is, then get help today and change your life. Go to kevinandceline.com/sex-coaching-couples. The link is in the description. And schedule a strategy call with me today so we can map out a strategy to get you where you want to be so you can have it all your way. Go to kevinandceline.com/sex-coaching-couples and book your strategy call today. So that is obviously my couples coaching program, and that is where I get to help couples, which I love doing, with all things sex, love, and relationship, utilizing all the years of my own study, my own work, and Celine's study and her work that we merged together in this program. So go check that out, kevinandceline.com/sex-coaching-couples. The link is in the description. Okay, so let's cover some of Celine's favorite topics to teach men. Number one is how to last longer. She spent a lot of time teaching men how to last longer. And I suspect, I don't really remember honestly off the top of my head, but I suspect it was because she knew that not only did it help men, but it helped women a lot too. So for women to really be truly sexually satisfied in a relationship, a woman needs a man who can last at least long enough for her to get to her orgasm. And so teaching men how to last longer is something that really benefited both halves of the relationship. And she was really passionate about that. She spent a lot of time teaching men, both remotely and physically in person, how do you control your ejaculation? How do you separate your orgasm from your ejaculation? And so, this is a major part of our Power and Mastery course. We have, Power Up Your Erections, which of course is about, how to achieve and maintain strong erections, because erectile dysfunction is a big problem. But then we have Master Your Ejaculation, which is the second course, which is all about how to last longer, how to separate your orgasm and your ejaculation, how to really control, or as we say, master your ejaculation so that you have control over it and you decide, I think I want to ejaculate now, or I don't want to. And you can take the woman on as long of a journey as you want to take her. And then, of course, the third one is sexual mastery, which incorporates a whole bunch of, mastery techniques for men when it comes to sexuality. And, of course, if you buy sexual mastery, we throw in Master Your Ejaculation and Power Up Your Erections for free as bonuses to the sexual mastery course, so you get everything. But anyway, I already did a commercial for that at the beginning of this show. But how to last longer. So in that, Céline would teach the arousal scale, which is, basically how to be aware of where you're at as a man on this scale of 1 to 10. Because if you know where you're at in your arousal, then you know what steps to take to control that arousal so that you don't go too far and end up ejaculating too soon. So teaching the arousal scale was a big part of it. teaching what we call the mindful masturbation practice, which is retraining how you masturbate. So that it's not just about rushing to the destination, which is the ejaculation. It's about taking more time. It's about learning how to ride the waves of energy, and then ultimately getting to the point where you can separate orgasm and ejaculation, so that you can have control. Now, unfortunately, a lot of men, and this is a second thing on the list that she loved to teach, which is how to improve their masturbation habits. A lot of men have taught themselves how to masturbate a certain way that isn't serving them. And by that, I mean that, you start out masturbating very young, trying not to get caught. So you're doing it really quickly. And generally when young men discover their penises, it is all about, the feeling, which is, ooh, this feels really good. And, oh, it feels really good to ejaculate. And so you're just going straight for the destination. But that, of course, basically trains your body to get to ejaculation as quickly as you can. Also, a lot of men masturbate to porn. And porn, it's kind of the same thing. Like, I don't remember the exact numbers of how long the average man watches porn, but it's a very short amount of time. And the majority of that time is usually spent actually like cruising through clips, trying to find the one that interests you in that moment. And then once you find it, you go straight to the masturbation and the ejaculation, and it's over pretty quick. Clean up, you're out, right? But that again is really teaching you bad habits. And so Céline loved to teach men how to shift that, how to change that, how to use masturbation not only for pleasure, but also as a way to train yourself to be a better lover. And that isn't just for the women's benefit, obviously lasting longer and having control over your ejaculation is important. But it also means that you as the man get to experience more pleasure for longer periods of time. So she loved helping men with that. And when she could really shift the way a man thought about sex, rather than like, oh, it's all about the destination, it's all about getting to that ejaculation. And instead shift that to, oh, this is a journey. And if I master my physical body, I can take my woman on a journey that, takes her to another reality and blows her mind and, makes her look at me like I'm some sort of a sexual god, right? She really loved helping men get to that spot. Along with that, she really loved teaching men how to be present with a woman. This was actually a big piece of the work that she would do when she was working with couples. She would have couples come in physically to her office, and she would guide them through exercises and connecting, and sometimes, yes, sex as well. And, she would just observe how they were relating to each other and what they were doing. And one of the big things that she would see is like a lot of men running through the motions of, I squeeze here and I touch here and I rub here and I do this and I do that, without truly being present in the moment with what they were doing. It's just like, okay, I know if I squeeze this and I tickle that and I lick this over here and I boom, okay, then she'll let me put my penis in, right? Which obviously wasn't really serving either party in the relationship. And so she really loved teaching a man, okay, let's slow down. Let's take each thing that you're doing here and really put some intention behind it. Let's focus on her and pay attention to how the things you're doing to her are affecting her. What are her eyes doing? Are they open? Are they closed? Are they rolling back in her head? Or are they squinting and like, ow, that's uncomfortable? Are her cheeks flush? Are her labia flush? Are they starting to swell and change color? Are her inner labia starting to open up? Is there wet? Like all of these signs and symptoms, like really being present with her. That when you as a man are, making love, whether it's foreplay or actual penetration or anything in between, that you are really focused 100% on her and what is happening between the two of you in the moment. That alone is such a powerful practice, even if you don't really get any better in your physical skill. If you can just learn to really be present with your woman during the entire act, from before it even starts until after it's over, you will see a huge shift in the quality of your lovemaking. And so she just loved being able to teach that to men and watch how the couples shift. Watch how they relate and how their sex absolutely has a major shift. Along with that, of course, is how to be a sexual master, of which being present is simply one of those skills that we teach in the sexual mastery course and that Céline loved to teach. So lots of practices involved in how to be a sexual master. Could be everything from, how to really touch a woman's genitals, how to give a vulva massage, she loved teaching men women's anatomy. How many men actually know the actual anatomy? Men can say, okay, this is your labia, this is your vagina, this is your clitoris. But how many men know much more than that? I mean, how many men even know that there's outer labia and inner labia? How many men know that the clitoris isn't just that little part you see, above the urethral opening, right? That it has legs and goes down both sides. So underneath those outer labia, the labia majora, there's actual clitoris inside underneath that is responsive to touch on the outside, right? So there's other places in the vagina that you can touch that will really do a lot to stimulate your woman and turn her on and get her juices flowing. A lot of men don't know those things because they've never been taught it. They're never going to teach you that in, sex class when you're in school, right? And unless you've actively gone out and sought that information, you just don't know it. So Céline loved to teach both men and women. We'll get to that when we talk about the women's topics, about that anatomy. And once you understand that anatomy, suddenly this whole world of different things you can do to create pleasure just opens up. So that's just one of many things when it comes to being a sexual master that she loved to teach. She would teach breast massage, presence. There's internal vaginal massage practices and the external. How to, of course, master your ejaculation and everything from levels of touch. There's many different levels of touch. Setting the scene to create amazing sexual experiences. There's so many things all wrapped up in there that she was really passionate about teaching men how to do. Let's see, a couple other things that she worked a lot with men on that she really liked. One of them was how to release shame around their sexuality. When it comes to talking about women, that's pretty obvious. A lot of women have had shame around sexuality because a lot of women have been shamed for being sexual, especially in the past. Not as much these days, but it's still there. But it's less talked about men and shame around sexuality. And there can be quite a bit of shame beneath the surface. I encounter it all the time in my male clients that I work with. So that was another thing that she really loved to help men with. It's like getting to the root of where does that shame come from? Was it an early experience in childhood? Was it something you just inherited from, your lineage or something like that? Like really getting to the root of where that shame comes from. And then figuring out how do we let go of that shame and reprogram us to not see that sexuality as something that is shameful or weird or wrong. And what she was really great at around that shame thing is like she would have clients that would hire her to coach her who just wanted to be able to be fully expressed in their sexuality without being judged. So she would get on virtual calls with people who are like, hey, I'm into this kind of thing that I think is weird when it comes to sex, right? And she would just help validate them like, hey, that's not really weird. And like, obviously there could potentially be things that are borderline, but she would never, I don't recall her ever having any of those clients that came to her with something that was really, really outside. Like, yeah, I'm into necrophilia and please tell me that's okay. No. But there are lots of things that are okay that people do have shame around because, for whatever reason. So she was really great at helping men with that. She was also really passionate about helping men heal their prostates. That was another thing that she spent a lot of time helping men with, was like, hey, by the way, did you know you have a prostate? Did you know how important that is to your sexual functioning? And did you know that there are things that you could be doing to keep your prostate functioning healthy? A lot of people, including men themselves, don't know that a lot of your ejaculate is produced in the prostate. It doesn't all come from your testicles. And so, making sure that your prostate is healthy can really help make sure that, you are producing the right volume of ejaculate, and that ejaculate has the right nutrients in it to sustain healthy sperm. And, that's where your pre-cum comes from, that helps create lubrication, right? So she was really passionate about that. Don't know why necessarily. That's not necessarily a Taoist teaching or practice or anything like that. But I think maybe because she didn't have hang-ups around that, that she felt that she could really help a lot of men with it, because a lot of teachers just wouldn't go there. But yeah, prostate health is something that is really important. And so especially for aging men, you want to make sure that you're keeping it healthy so that you can keep your sexual function working healthy. If you do end up having, prostate cancer or, something like that, and you have to have surgery on your prostate, it can cause lifelong permanent sexual dysfunction. So making sure that you keep your prostate healthy can also help make sure that you keep your sexual abilities functioning the way they should as you get older. So that's really important. All right, so those are some of the things that Céline really loved. I mean, that's just a, kind of a top, 6 list or whatever, but she worked obviously with men on a whole range of things. Those were just some of her favorite things that I noticed over the years she would do more often than some of the other things. Like, those are some of the big ones that she was helping men with a lot. So let's talk about the women now. Céline also worked a lot with women. It's interesting because when she first started doing the work, her original vision was always like, oh, I'm going to work with women. And she always thought that that's where she was going to put all of her efforts. And sort of not surprisingly, because she was a young, beautiful woman, she had a lot of male clients gravitating to her. And while I know in the early days, a lot of these male clients just wanted to be looked at or talked to or, even touched because she was a certified sexological body worker where she could legally touch men, like doing prostate massage and things like that. I know that a lot of the early clients, male clients, that's what they wanted. But she was absolutely intent on making sure that what they got was what they actually needed. And it turned into a real learning experience. But be that as it may, a lot of her early clients tended to be men. And then after a number of years, that started shifting a lot, and it started coming full circle around again to the point where she was working with a lot of women, and she really loved that too. She always said that she was so grateful for the experience of working with so many men because it taught her so much about men and about how they work and what they need, that it made her coaching with women that much better. If she had just started out with women and didn't have all that experience with men, her work wouldn't have been as powerful as it really was when it came around full circle. So let's talk about some of the things that Céline loved to teach women. Well, I mentioned this with the men, but it's also true of the women. She loved to teach women about their vulvas. She loved to get women, in person and through looking at their own actual genitals and also looking at some models where you can see a little deeper inside and teaching women. You would be amazed how many women don't know how their own, parts work. I was always amazed by that too. And I used to say, I just don't get it. Like, as men, we know every, millimeter of our penises and all of that stuff. But over the years, having asked quite a lot of women, like, how is this possible? I've gotten some really good answers, and I understand why this is now. When you realize that there's been a lot of shame in society around women and their genitals, and how they're told not to touch them and not to, look at them and not to masturbate and all that kind of stuff, a lot of women unfortunately grew up basically ignoring that they had genitals. There's some other reasons too, but that's kind of the main one, is the shame put around it and how they're told not to investigate it. So it makes sense. So Céline spent a lot of time helping women. I was obviously not in sessions with her when she was doing this with women, but I know what she was doing in there. And, just simple practices like, having a woman take a mirror and really look at their vulva for the first time. And not just outside, like, hey, how about trying to spread the lips a little bit and looking inside, right? These are things that so many women, it would blow their mind. They would cry. Women would put that mirror down there and really look into themselves, and they would literally start crying. So she loved teaching women about their vulvas, about their vaginas, about what their clitoris really looks like on the inside. She loved to teach them about how to really access their own pleasure. A lot of women know about the clitoris, or at least the part that they can see and touch externally. But a lot of women also didn't know about the extent of the clitoris and the legs and how you can stimulate the clitoris in other ways than just, touching the tip of the clitoris. And then, how to really access their sexual pleasure. Again, a lot of women were told that sexual pleasures, that's not for them and they shouldn't be doing that, right? So a lot of women don't even know or how to really, masturbate in a way that takes them to some deep places. Now, a lot of women have mastered, like, okay, here's how I can rub out a quick clitoral orgasm, or as Céline used to call it, the genital sneeze. But she loved teaching women how you could get deeper, how you could really take this practice to new levels, and how those new levels through your own self-practice would then open up new levels in your lovemaking with your partner. Because if you can't even go there by yourself, you're probably not going to be able to get there with your partner. So she loved teaching women this and watching it just crack them wide open. As part of that, she loved teaching women the Jade Egg Practice. She had like all of her friends buying eggs. you have to get an egg, And they don't have to be jade eggs, by the way. They can be made out of different things, but it's generally referred to as the Jade Egg Practice. It was something that she found very profound for her own self and her own vagina and practice. And she loved teaching it to other women. She taught it to any woman who would want to hear it. She taught it to all her friends for free, just like, I'll teach you, come over, And she would give them a link and say, go buy yourself an egg here. She would teach them how to sterilize it. She would have them come over and teach them this practice. And of course, she did that for many, many, many of her clients also. If you're not aware of the Jade Egg Practice, it's basically where you take something in the shape of an egg, generally relatively small, and it has a string tied to it, and you insert it inside the vagina, and then you practice using the muscles inside your vagina to move the egg around. So at first, you're just squeezing and trying to feel the egg and go, okay, yeah, I can feel it. And so the entry level practice is like, can I keep it in and walk around all day and not have it fall out, right? And then some of the more advanced level practices are, how can I move it around? Can I move it closer to the entrance? Can I then move it back up deeper inside? Can I move it to a specific place within? And that really helps strengthen the muscles inside the vagina and give you greater control over those muscles, which will help with your own orgasm. And it will also feel really, really good for your partner when you can actually utilize those muscles in there to grab onto his penis, to massage it internally. It's really, truly an amazing feeling from my end. So she loved teaching women that Jade Egg practice. Also, it's a fantastic practice for women who've given birth. And those muscles, obviously, in the vagina have had to stretch out in order to, give birth to a child. I've had a lot of women say things like, well, once you're, in your late 30s and you've had 2 kids, you got to be careful because if you laugh a little too hard, you'll pee on yourself. And that is true for a lot of women, but it doesn't have to be true. And too many women accept that as, that's just the way it is. But the reality is, through a practice like the Jade Egg practice, you can actually tone up all those muscles again, all those pelvic floor muscles, and you can actually heal that. Some other things, not so much with the Jade practice, although it can happen with the Jade practice, that Céline liked to work with women on is releasing trauma stored inside the vagina. If this is new to you and you've never heard this before, trauma can be stored all over through our bodies. Trauma is not just something that occurs in our brains. If you want to know the science behind that, just go read Candace Pert's book, Molecules of Emotion. She's the woman, she worked for NIH, and she discovered the opiate receptor and realized that there are receptor sites throughout the entire body that can store those molecules or chemicals of emotion. So this can happen inside the vagina. You've had traumatic sexual experience, whether it was, being molested as a child or just, saying yes to sex when you were young when you didn't want it, or having a partner who was rough and didn't really care about you, whatever it is, sexual shame. There's all kinds of reasons why there might be trauma stored inside the vagina. And so working with practices like this can actually help release that trauma stored in there. And once you release that trauma, that opens you up to a whole nother world of pleasure. Along with that is, again, this idea of letting go and releasing sexual shame. So that was another thing that she really loved to work with women on. Shame around their private parts, shame around their vulvas and their vaginas, and shame around just wanting sex and being a sexual being. There's, of course, been a lot of programming for centuries, really, around, women shouldn't be sexual and they shouldn't want sex, and then, they shouldn't do that sort of thing. And that, of course, is nonsense. Women are just as sexual as men, if not more sexual. The main difference between women and men is women will not act on it as easily as men. In other words, men are very sexual. They're very open about their sexuality, and they're pretty much willing to have sex anytime, anywhere, with anyone. Not 100% true. Certainly not true for me as I get older, but it's true for a lot of men. Whereas women may want sex just as much, and in some cases even more than men do. They're just less likely to act on it unless the circumstances are much closer to meeting their actual needs. Like they're pickier with, who they will have sex with, or where or when, and that sort of thing. But releasing sexual shame would open women up a lot to that. Which leads me to the next one, which is how to really open deeply, how to really open and expand and have trust in your masculine partner so that you can really open and expand. It's another thing Céline really loved helping women with, was how do you really open? As the feminine, your job is to relax and expand and receive the masculine as deeply as you possibly can. And that is not an easy thing for a lot of women to do because of all the trauma, because of the way the masculine has fallen short for generation after generation and not shown up as the healthy, integrated masculine man that he's capable of being. So yeah, she spent a lot of time really helping women learn how to open deeply and trust. That, of course, leads me to how to female ejaculate, or squirt, as it's called. That's another thing Céline liked to teach women. One of the reasons she liked to teach women this is because she taught herself. So what does that mean? Well, some women just naturally do it. And if you ask them, they'd be like, I don't know. I don't know how I do it. I've always done it. Whenever I've been really turned on and really built up the sexual energy and I orgasm, I just ejaculate, I squirt, right? But that's not true of a lot of women. A lot of women are like, I've never squirted in my life. I don't even know how. And Céline was one of those women. She didn't always do it. But when she found out it was possible, she was like, ooh, okay, I want to figure out how to do this. And she did teach herself how to do it. And it wasn't just like, oh, I made it happen once. I mean, she went from not female ejaculating at all to being able to female ejaculate regularly, and sometimes in some rather large volumes. So she loved teaching other women how to do it. She's like, if I learned how to do it, I can teach you how to do it. One of the keys, of course, to that is being able to let go of the shame, being able to master the Jade Egg Practice, and being able to really learn how to open deeply. Those are a couple of the keys to female ejaculation. Also, learning that there are different types of orgasms for women. So it's not just clitoral orgasms. There are G-spot orgasms, and there are cervical orgasms. And so helping women learn that there are, and being able to distinguish, have, of course, and then be able to distinguish between the different types. When it comes to squirting, having G-spot orgasms are one of the ways that you can really tap into the ability to female ejaculate. So those are some other things that Céline really loved teaching. And then the last one was something that she was passionate about, everything that I talked about. But later in her career, she really loved teaching women how to embody their femininity. And she had created an entire course called The Irresistible Woman, and it was all about how to really embody your feminine essence and your feminine power. So how you can achieve what you want to achieve, like in your relationship and with your man, and how you can get him to step up by being feminine, not by being more masculine. And a lot of women think the way I'm going to make stuff happen, or the way I'm going to get my man to do this and do that and whatever, and show up, the way I need him to, is by sort of forcing him and being in my masculine energy. I need you to do this, and I want you to. And it seems like, no, that's not how you get there. You get there by being feminine. And the women who went through that program with her really found it groundbreaking. It really shifted. I ran into a woman just a few months ago who was in one of Céline's first classes. And she was still talking about it years later, about the profound impact that it had on her. And just how much, she wished that could still be out there. I do have a project on my, unfortunately, too long of a list of projects. I have all the content that she created for that. And I do want to package it into an evergreen online course and bring back the Irresistible Woman program because of conversations like that I have. So I will get to that eventually. I don't know how long that will take. I can't make any promises. But I would like to bring that back because of how powerful it was. So yeah, just working with women and getting them out of this sort of masculine role they've taken on because of society, and getting them to really embody their femininity, which really calms most women's nervous systems, makes them feel more like their true selves. It shifts dynamics in relationships with their men. And really, it makes the woman's life better, the man's life better, and the world better as a whole. So that was another thing that she was really, really passionate about, was helping women really return to their true essence of the feminine women that they are, but in a way that is an empowered feminine woman, not a disempowered feminine woman. So yeah, those were some of the things that Céline really loved to teach women. So I just wanted to cover some of her favorite things. I just wanted to put it out there again and let you know that those things still exist. We have videos on our YouTube channel covering most of that. Of course, we have the online courses for men. And yeah, if any of those things sounded interesting to you and you're like, oh, wow, yeah, that thing you were talking about letting go of shame, or about jade eggs, or, I want to learn more about, my vulva or her vulva, or, I want to learn how to be really present, or I want to reshape my masturbation practice in a way that serves me instead of hurts me, like any of that stuff. I am still teaching all of these things. And I do want you to know also that in this past year, now it's going on almost a year, I've opened my practice up to be working with women again, which I was not doing for the first year that I was coaching on my own without Céline. For various reasons, I kind of thought I couldn't do that or shouldn't do that or whatever. And I have since come to my senses and realized that there's still a lot of value that I can give, and I've been working with groups of women as well as women individually, and it's been absolutely amazing. I love working with the women that I work with, just like Céline loved working with the men that she worked with. So I'm really excited about that. So, whether you're a man or a woman or a couple, just like the intro to this show says, if any of these things that I talked about that were Céline's favorite topics to teach, or anything else really, but if you're interested in learning more about that, go to my website, go check it out, sign up for a strategy call, go check out the online courses, watch some free videos, go back to older episodes that Céline and I did here on the Love Lab podcast. We did 223 episodes together where we covered so many of these topics. So there's a ton of information out there and a ton of ways to still be able to access her work, the genius of who she was. It's still all there. And I'm still channeling it through me, right? So you can always work with me as well. So, all right. There you go. A little bit longer episode today. I didn't realize it was going to go so long. I was like, I don't know if I have enough to say in this episode, but I guess words are I'm never at a lack of words. If you've listened to this show for any amount of time, you probably know that already. But there you go. There is a little tribute of mine on the roughly 2-year anniversary of the passing of Céline Remy, my dear wife and my life partner, and my co-creator in so much of the work that I've put out there in the world over the years. I hope maybe that give you a little bit more insight into her world, my world, how all of this work was created, and I hope it did a decent job in honoring who she was and the work that she put out. And I also hope maybe you learned a couple of things as I talked about some of her favorite teaching topics, and that maybe it inspired you to start on your own course of study in the realm of sexuality. And of course, if you ever need any help on that journey, I am here to help you. All right, everybody, that is all I have for this episode, and I will see you next week. I hope you liked this episode of the Love Lab podcast. If you enjoyed this show, subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your friends. And for more free exclusive content, join me in the Passion Vault at kevinandceline.com/vault. That's kevinandceline.com/vault. Thanks for listening, and remember, as Céline used to say, you're amazing.